to, or in some cases, be really glad I'm not. But it's the development of the scene and the characters and the way that we get immersed. Elizabeth has been a teacher for us from time to time, and when she teaches at our mystery conference, the most amazing thing happens. The very famous mystery writers who usually, when someone else is teaching, take that opportunity to go out on the patio and have a drink, frankly. Not if Elizabeth is teaching. If she's talking about character development, they are in the back of the rooms quickly scribbling notes. I guess now they would do it into their phones or something. I still learn by writing with pencils. So I see that happening, and I am so amazed how many times an author who is here and very famous himself will say, well, Elizabeth George taught me to do this. I learned this from Elizabeth George. And the woman's so modest that it's truly amazing how many people whose lives have been touched by her. She does have the Elizabeth George Foundation, where she supports unpublished fiction writers, playwrights, poets, and organizations that help disadvantaged young people. So she may think about murder a lot. If you are a writer, I suggest you pick up right away. It will be a writing course all in itself. But now we're ready for A Banquet of Consequences. And I am not going to tell you all the secrets in this book, but I will tell you there are a lot of family secrets here. And you are going to have so much fun. Just turn off your phone tonight and don't plan on doing anything for the next week. It is my thrill to introduce you to my friend Elizabeth George.
Once again, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. When you go out on book tour, you never know what's going to happen. And sometimes what happens is wonderful, and sometimes what happens is that you go to a bookstore and nobody's there. So I do appreciate it, and I hope you know that. What I'm going to do today is talk a little bit, and then I'm going to do something I hardly ever do, which is to read a part of the scene from the book and then answer questions. I'd like to begin by putting this book in context. In the book that preceded this, a book called Just One Evil Act, one of the detectives in the book, Barbara Havers, finds herself in very, very deep water. And the reason for this is that she has left without leave to go and has taken herself to Italy, despite being expressly told that she cannot do that. So she's done that because her neighbor and good friend, Timur Azar, has had his daughter disappear. And his daughter was taken by her mother, whom Azar had felt he had reconciled with. But the mother had a big plan all along, which was to, make Azar feel comfortable with her, comfortable enough that she could then ultimately abscond with the child who actually had been living with him for many years. And into that situation, Barbara has thrown herself in the previous book. And because he's a good friend of hers, and indeed she really loves him and can't stand to see him suffering, she becomes really too involved and does many things that I've had people say that they were reading the book saying, don't do it, Barbara. And she does it anyway. She does it all. Well, at the end of that book, she's in pretty serious trouble. And her detective superintendent, a woman named Isabel Artery, has come up with only one way to control her, and that is, Lindley doesn't want her to get rid of Barbara. He knows that she's a good cop, but he also knows that she's very difficult to control. Isabel's idea is, okay, you can stay, but here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you sign the transfer paperwork requesting a transfer to this place in the north of England called Berwick-upon-Tweed. And that's the only way she will get to stay at New Scotland Yard. Isabel's holding that paperwork, and Barbara knows if she steps out of line, then that paperwork is just going to go in, and she has a nice future up in Berwick-upon-Tweed. Now, if you've ever been to Berwick-upon-Tweed, then you know that isn't the kind of place that somebody would aspire to end their career in. As a matter of fact, a woman last night at my signing said that I'd been there, and she said to me, she said, I went to Berwick-upon-Tweed once, and we couldn't find a hotel, and we asked a man on the street if he could recommend a hotel, and he said, why would you want to stay here? So I drove on, but I did stay there overnight, I think, or maybe 2 nights, because we wanted to go to Holy Island, which is in that area. Anyway, so that's how Isabel has been controlling her. Now, as a result of that control that Isabel has on Barbara, Barbara has really been towing the line. She's been doing everything, because the last thing she wants to do is be transferred. But the problem with her doing everything exactly the way she's supposed to do it is that she's really lost the part of her that was good in police work, and that is the part to actually see beyond the square that confines you. She's staying confined within that square. So Lindley has just gone to Isabel to see if there's any way she's going to back off, because Barbara's not doing her best. And Isabel has said, I like her just the way she is. So she's not about to do anything. So I'd like to read you this scene that has in it a character that you've seen before if you've read the books, but she's never really had a very big role. And in this book she has a little bit bigger role, and her name is Dorothea Harriman. Dorothea Harriman is the departmental secretary. And so she's featured in this scene with Lindley. And I'd like to read it to you, because I kind of like it. He was in the corridor heading to his own office when he heard Dorothea Harriman behind him, her identity telegraphed by the snapping of her stiletto heels on the lino, as well as her typical style of greeting anyone after met by full title only, no initials allowed. She said, Detective Inspector Lindley. When he turned, she was casting a glance back over her shoulder. She said when she reached him, could I have a word? And she indicated one of the stairwells in the center of the building, a frequent hideaway of net smokers, hoping to get away with a few drags to sustain them until they had time to duck outside and pace the requisite distance from the entrance. Lindley followed her through the door. 2 uniformed constables were on the landing, applying coins to a vending machine while having a conversation about the bloody bastard deserving what he got, you ask me. Dorothea waited until they'd made their purchases and plonked down to the floor below. She didn't speak until she heard the door click shut behind them. Then she said, not wishing to be the bearer of bad news, but going there anyway. Christ, I haven't driven her to transfer Barbara at once, have I? No, of course not. And rest assured, she won't do that unless the detective sergeant forces her hand. But Barbara being Barbara and hand forcing being her primary forte, along with line crossing and going entirely off the rails. You'd hope to forestall what you see as the inevitable, Dorothy said. That's what I reckoned you were up to. But really, there's not going to be a change in that direction, Detective Inspector. Dorothea indicated the route should come from Isabel's office as a means of identifying the antecedent when she went on with, she thinks she's done the right thing, and the only thing. She's not about to back off. Not without a miracle the likes of which I've not yet encountered, Lindley agreed. And truth to tell, the detective sergeant does look ever so slightly more put together these days, wouldn't you say? Her physical appearance is hardly the pointy, as you no doubt overheard. Dorothea dropped her gaze and strove to look embarrassed, although Lindley knew very well that the young woman experienced absolutely no shame when it came to her peerless skill at eavesdropping. Admittedly, she said, things haven't been nearly as lively as they used to be, now that Detective Sergeant Havers is being so not Detective Sergeant Havers. And things definitely have become less interesting. You won't find me disagreeing, Dee, but aside from persuading the superintendent to be rid of that transfer request, which she will never do, I've got the first idea how to put Barbara into a position where her brain is firing the way it once did without the additional problem of that same brain encouraging to go her own way and ignore what she's been ordered to do. Lindley sighed and looked down at his shoes, which he noted wanted a decent polishing. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Dorothea said. How to bring Barbara's work up to snuff? In a manner of speaking. What does that mean? Dorothea smoothed the non-existent rock. Is that my phone? Oh, that's yours. Sorry. Not always mine. I'll just wait.
Sorry.
That's a business horrible minutes. Dorothea smoothed the non-existent ruck in the seam of her frock. She was wearing a frothy summer dress of swirling, saturated colors, and she topped this with some sort of hot pink half cardigan affair, whose style Lindley's late wife would have been able to name without hesitation, but Lindley himself could not. It was far too dressy an ensemble for a day at the Met, but Dorothea, as usual, made it work. She said, "It's this. Obviously, she's desperately unhappy just now. She's being someone she isn't. She's like a pendulum that swung too far one way and now is swinging too far the other." That fairly well describes it, Lindley said. Well, I think there's always been a solution to the problems she has here at the Met, although I'm fairly sure you aren't going to like it if I bring that solution to light. Shall I anyway? Try me, he said. Fine, here it is. She's too focused. She always has been. She's been, let's call it hyper-focused. It's generally been on her work and investigation, that sort of thing, but now the only focus she has is how to stay out of trouble with Detective Superintendent Artery. Well, as Artery's holding the transfer paperwork, I don't disagree with that assessment at all. Well, that's due to something, don't you think? What is? Her problem with hyperfocus. I dare say it's due to Barbara's not wanting to end at the barrack upon Tweed, and I can hardly blame her. Certainly, but that's only half of it, Detective Inspector. The rest of it is what she's not thinking about. And thinking about that would relieve her of the strain of thinking only about how not to get herself sent up north. Yes? Agreed, more or less, Lindley said cautiously. He did wonder where all this was heading. So tell me, he went on, what is it that she's not thinking about that she actually ought to be thinking about? Dorothea looked patently startled at the question. Goodness, it's what everyone is always thinking about, Detective Inspector. I'm intrigued. Go on. Sex, she said. Sex. He glanced around the stairwell to emphasize what he was about to see. Say, Dorothea, ought we be having this conversation? Sexual harassment being all the rage, you mean? Detective Inspector Lindley, let's please set political correctness aside for a moment and just get down to facts. Dorothea indicated the stairwell with a manicured hand, by which she also indicated the entire Met. Detective Sergeant Havers needs to think like the rest of humanity. She's always needed that, which means she needs to think of something more than the Met, her job, and being transferred. Sex is just the ticket for that, and I suspect you know that as well as I do. Call it love, romance, making babies, finding a soulmate, settling down, or anything else you like. It all comes down to the same thing at the end of the day, a mate. The detective sergeant needs an outlet. She needs someone special so that her whole world is not this place. Lindley eyed her. You're suggesting that Barbara needs to find a man, aren't you? I am. She needs a love life. We all need a love life. Have you ever known the detective sergeant to have one? You don't even need to answer. No, she hasn't had one. That's why she keeps falling afoul of T. Has it ever occurred to you that not every woman on the planet wants or even needs a man? Dorothea took a step back. Her smooth brow creased. Heavens, Detective Inspector, are you suggesting the detective sergeant is an asexual being? No? Then what? Not that that's completely ridiculous, I don't believe it. Because she and that professor, her neighbor, the man with the lovely little daughter, she paused but thoughtful. On the other hand, there is her hair. And the strange lack of interest in makeup and her absolutely appalling dress sense, but still, have we gone down the rabbit hole, Lindley asked her, is this merely an intriguing illustration of random thinking? Dorothea looked flustered, which was entirely unlike her, but she gathered herself together heroically. No matter, all that's to be decided, she said obscurely, but we'll use her professor friend as an example. Timel Azar, Lindley told her, the daughter's called Hadia. They were Barbara's neighbors. What are we using them as examples of? What she needs, she declared, what she might have had they not left the country. Barbara and Azar, let me clarify, just to be sure it was on the right track, what they might have had together. Indeed, sex. Yeah, sex, a relationship, a love affair, romance. Had things gone that way, she'd be a different woman, you mark my words. And being a different woman is what she needs. And the way to get her there, the entire process of getting her there, I can be helped. Lily felt his skepticism rise. You know, of course, that Azar and his daughter are in Pakistan now. As far as I know, they're not coming back anytime soon, and Barbara certainly can't go with them. So what exactly are you suggesting? Surely not sending Barbara on a blind date. Pray not that. Oh, please. Detective Sergeant Havers is not about to step out on a blind date. No. This situation you and I are looking at, it must be gone at a bit more obliquely. She straightened her shoulders and threw her head back. Detective Inspector Lilly, I'd like to offer to take the project in hand. Towards what end? Lilly inquired. To the obvious end, she announced, the end that delivers her to love, of course, in any particular form it takes. And you actually think this will make a difference? Lily asked her. She smiled a smile replete with knowledge. Trust me, she said. That's how that puts Barbara Havers into Dorothea Merriman's more than capable hands, and the story continues from that point. In this book, Lindley investigates part of there are three locations: Cambridge and Shaftesbury, which is in Dorset, and London, and then other locations in Dorset, which is southwest of London. Lindley is responsible for the case as it unfolds in Cambridge and in London, and Havers and Nkata are responsible for the case as it unfolds in Shaftesbury. And this puts Havers and Nkata into close living accommodations with each other, with the kind of suitable craziness that you can imagine going on between those two extremely different human beings. So anyway, that's a little bit about this book and a little bit about where it takes place. And what I'd like to do now is to answer a few questions, if you have any. And I know you do, because some people were asking questions as I walked around, and I said save that for when I ask for questions. So don't be shy. I know it's always very strange. Go ahead, throw yourself into it. Yes.
How is it that a girl from Ohio, of which I am one as well, is so adept at writing about the British culture, the parliaments, the settlers, etc.?
Well, the several parts to that answer. The first part, and did everybody hear the question? She wanted to know about why somebody from Ohio became adept at writing British novels. The first part of the answer is that I have a long-time love of Great Britain that started in 1966, which was the first time I went over there. But it was engendered by my interest in British pop culture at the time. I was a teenager, and in 1966, it was in the heyday of swinging London. I went over there, and it was before they had changed their monetary system. It was all the same old England. It was old England in those days. And I really liked it. All my reading, young adult and adult life, I've read mostly British novels rather than American novels. Sort of as a result of that, I taught Shakespeare when I was a teacher in high school, and I also studied Shakespeare and have great love for Shakespeare and for English history. So all of that put together really kind of explains why I'm fascinated with Great Britain. As far as writing the novels goes, well, first of all, I always do my research in advance so that I know where I am going to set the novel in a particular area, be it an area of London or an area of the greater countryside, as in this case, Dorset. And when I do my research, I actually go to all those different places, and while I'm in those places, I speak to people. I frequently am able to go into their homes and see how they live. I visit many different locations, not knowing which one I will actually use in the book itself. So that's how I put myself in a position to be able to write it. as far as the linguistics go, it's the same thing. If you read a lot of British books and you watch a lot of British television, which I do, and you listen, you're going to hear all kinds of stuff that these people are saying. But just usually that it's, you wouldn't notice it because you're not listening for it, but I'm listening specifically for that, so I notice a turn of phrase, and I tend not to forget a turn of phrase. And then I also have, I'm aware that they use, that their syntax is a little bit different from our syntax. They use language a little bit differently, and that just comes from, from exposure, watching British television while I'm there, reading British newspapers and magazines too. So that's sort of how it all gets put together. Then a girl born in Ohio who grew up in Mountain View, and British novels. So, another question? Yes.
Are you considering writing a follow-up book to what came before he shot her?
Yes. So the question was, am I considering writing a follow-up book to What Came Before He Shot Her? What Came Before He Shot Her was a real departure book, and there was a book in which I went back 18 months before a book called With No One as Witness, and led up to a killing that takes place with no one as witness. Not the killing being investigated, but a side killing that's a random shooting on the street. And so I wanted to explore what led up to that killing, what came before he shot her, and so I wrote that book as it was a challenge for me because the person who confesses to the crime is a 12-year-old multiracial child who lives on a housing estate in West London, and I really wanted to get into the life that he lives there, and so the challenge for me was to be able to put myself into the mindset of the boy, and also to be able to write about a housing estate in London. So at the end of that book, the reader knows exactly what happened. Not only what came before he shot her, but what happened on the day he shot her. And the police don't know. So it puts the reader in a completely different position than the police are in. And I considered writing a follow-up, not at this point, but I never say that, well, I won't do that, because I never know, exactly what's going to happen and what mindset I will develop about what needs to be explored next in the lives of these characters. So I might do that, but it's really never say never. Yes, way in the back.
What led to the young adult novels, and how are they different than the literary series?
What led to the young adult novels that I write, and how are they different? Well, what led to the young adult novels was something really simple. I decided that I wanted to write a realistic book about the Pacific Northwest with teenagers in it, and it wasn't that nobody's doing that, but it was that I wasn't reading anybody else. And I don't read a lot of young adult fiction, although it's very good. I highly recommend it, because since I embarked upon doing young adult, I decided it would behoove me to read some. But what I had read was the first of the Twilight books. And I could tell from reading that book, and it's really fun to read, and actually the movies are a hoot and a holler. I've seen all the films, I love them, because they're just so much fun to watch, for all the wrong reasons, but they're still really fun to watch. But anyway, but when I read that book, I could tell that the writer had never been to the Pacific Northwest, let alone, to Forks, because I'd been to Forks, and so, has anybody in here ever been to Forks? So you know that Forks isn't exactly a place that you would, you're not going to go there on vacation, or maybe to fish, maybe, but it's a pretty grim place. And the way she was describing it, the way she was describing Port Angeles, I knew she hadn't been there, so I thought, well, I wonder if I could write a realistic young adult novel about the Pacific Northwest that, people might read and go, ooh, I'd really like to go to that place and see what that place is like. So that's what I decided to do. But unlike a lot of young adult books, these books tell, it's a saga. So what it is, it will be a group of 6 books that tell about the high school experience of five kids who live in and around Langley, Washington, on Whidbey Island, which is where I live. And so it's not about a dystopian universe, it's not about witches and werewolves, it's not about vampires, it's not about zombies. It's about these 5 kids, and each kid, and they're from 14 to 19 years old, they all have a challenge that they're facing in their lives. It's either a familial challenge, or it is a mental challenge, or it is a psychological challenge, and they're all facing this, and they all have to come to terms with it during the course of these novels. And so it tells a much bigger story, and that's sort of how it's different. It's a lengthy answer, so the short version was, I wanted to encourage people to come to Whidbey Island because it's really beautiful, and especially to come to Langley. And I thought it would be fun if people read the books, came and saw that everything in the book is right there. There's nothing that's made up. You can walk in the steps of all the characters in the book. It's all there. So that's sort of what my intention was. Yeah.
Getting back to Lindley, I'm curious to know whether when you're writing a book, like we all know you take us wherever you're going to take it, do you know where the characters are going, or does it just transpire as you sit down to write the book? And secondly, is Lindley's relationship, I think it's Deirdre, is that in this book too?
Yes.
Oh,
So
yes.
the second
So
question.
do you know where they're going? Like if I ask you now, do you know what you're going to do 2 books down the road? Or?
Okay, that's really an interesting question. So, well, one of the things that she asked was that is Lindley became acquainted with a woman in Cornwall when he broke into her house to look for a telephone in Careless and Red, and it was, you know, he saw this kid fall from the cliff, and he needed to find a phone to call somebody, and so there was only one cottage in the area, and this is all real. If you could go there and see it, it's all there. So he went to this one cottage, broke in, and she wasn't there, and she arrived for a short stay, and gets there and sees this man inside her house, and that was their cute meet. That's how these 2 characters met. And anyway, so her name is Deirdre Trahair, and she is a large animal veterinarian. And so she's also a really, really good darts player and a very good roller derby player. And so Lindley has sort of gotten to know her, and then she moves to London to take a job at Regent Park Zoo. And so she is in this book too, yes, so that is explored. So then your other question was, do I know sort of how far I'm going to take the characters' stories in each book, basically? And I would have to say no. I don't know how far, but I do get a feeling for it as I'm writing the book, and I also get a feeling for early on I know which characters I'll be able to use, because when you're writing a book, everything has to be thematically unified. And that means that, whatever you're trying to write about in the book, in this book, it's from the title, A Banquet of Consequences. It's about people facing the consequences of the decisions they've made in their lives and of their actions. So that then is applied to my main characters, and I say, okay, my main characters, now whose story can I advance, and whose story will be, how far can I go with that story in such a way that it's thematically unified with the rest of the book. So I ask myself that question, and then I can kind of decide, all right, so I can do St. James and Deborah in this book because I know what this book is about. I know what they're dealing with, so they'll be the main characters. But I'm not sure exactly when I begin the book how far I'll be able to take their story. Because the books are, after all, crime novels, and I've got to also...
How did you come up with these 2 characters in the first place?
How did I come up with Lindley and Havers? How did I come up with Lindley and Havers? Well, the main character in the series was initially going to be St. James, the forensic scientist, and so that was my first character, and that was my image. But because he was going to be a forensic scientist, he needed somebody at New Scotland Yard who would come to him with forensic problems that he would be able to deal with and solve. So that then became Thomas Lindley. And I created Thomas Lindley just as a character that I would find interesting to write about. And so I would never find it interesting to write about a detective who is down on his luck, has bourbon in the drawer, lives in this, in this old, place with neon light going on. And I wanted to write about somebody whose life experience was totally not like mine. That's the kind of thing I like to do, because why write about my life experience? It's been pretty boring. So I created this guy, and I thought, well, let's first of all give him a title. And that was purely because I knew that in England you could be called George Gordon and still be Lord Byron, and for your whole life people would call you Byron. I thought that was so cool, you'd have these two names. So I decided, okay, let's make this guy Thomas Lindley Lord, and I came up with Lord Asherton. I don't even remember how, it's so long ago. So then I had to figure out, okay, if you're going to have that, what are you? You know, and so, I mean, you could be something like, you know, Lord Olivier. Well, Laurence Olivier was a, you know, he became a, I don't know if it's a Baron or what it was, but anyway. But I knew that, and this is how I do my research, I knew that Anthony Armstrong Jones, who was married to Princess Margaret, was the Earl of Snowdon. I knew that. And he was also called Lord Snowdon. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll just make my character an Earl. All right, so now he's an Earl. So I have Thomas Lindley. He's an Earl. I made him the 8th Earl of Asherton because it sounded pretty good. And then I just started, you know, throwing at him the stuff that he would probably have as an Earl. So he'd have a family pile somewhere. Cornwall. Why Cornwall? Because this was years ago. I was watching Poldark. The very first Poldark. The current Poldark, by the way. It's pretty steamy. It's really good. Anyway, that's what got me interested in Cornwall, because that's where Poldark was set. So I thought, okay, he's going to live in Cornwall. And then, you know, I just kept adding stuff as I went along. All right, so the first 2 books, the first book was never published. The second book ultimately was published as my 4th novel after I rewrote it. But those 2 books, St. James was the main character, and he solved the situation. So they weren't published. I thought, well, I'll get to my 3rd book. How about if I give this guy Lindley a case and see if he can solve a case? He works for Scotland Yard after all. Okay, so then I thought, well, if he's a detective, he needs a partner. And so what would be interesting, and I just created in Barbara Hager's his polar opposite. Whatever he was, she wasn't. She was the direct opposite of it. And that provided tension, which is provides conflict, and conflict is the core of drama in a book. So put them at loggerheads with each other. And initially their being at loggerheads has everything to do with class and Barbara's attitude toward him. Like a lot of people who are aristocrats like Lindley. I mean, he's a character who's perfectly capable of moving in any world. He doesn't feel uncomfortable in any world that he's in. That's sort of how he was brought up, because he always mixed with all kinds of people. But Barbara Havers didn't, of course, and so she is not, you know, she's immediately not comfortable with him, and she deals with her discomfort by disliking him. And in that first book, he wins her over as he wins the reader over, and then their relationship slowly alters as they learn to love each other as individuals, not as a man and woman who would ever have a sexual relationship, but as partners who really love each other and have each other's back. And I wanted to illustrate that in the books, that a man and woman could love each other and have nothing whatsoever to do with sex. It's just absolute love for each other. Yes.
Speaking of sex, are we ever going to see a sexy Lindley? I don't think any of the women in his life are worthy of him. No, I didn't. I cried when Helen died, but other than that, see, Isabel, Deirdre, none of these women, I think. I mean, I have a crush on them.
I was going to say, perhaps there's only one woman at this
right here.
I would like to see a sexier Lindley.
A sexier Lindley?
Yeah, I mean, because he's so far removed from everything, and he never appears real to me because he doesn't get really emotionally involved.
Well, you do have to remember that, you know, that he is a product of the British public school system. And one of the most hilarious things that Dorothea says in this book is when she's talking to Barbara Havers, and she says, "Have you ever had a decent bonk?" And she says, "By anyone except," she says, "except of course anybody who went to private school or boarding school." You know, they're immediately left out of it. So, you know, he's a product. He's a product of a very, very repressed group of people over there. So you're never going to see you're never going to see vast emoting from Lindley. Although I mean, he has gotten angry before, and he's certainly got angry in the presence of the enemy when he discovers that, you know, St. James Dapper and Helen, who he was engaged to, all got involved in in this investigation for this little girl who ends up dead, and he just is like beside himself. He's so furious. So he does do that. But as far as, huge emoting, no, he's probably never going to do that. That's not who he is. He just isn't. Yes.
Are there any plans to continue the Lily series on PBS?
The question was, are there any plans to do more on PBS with the Lindley series? Well, the books have all returned to me now, which is really a good thing. And so, because once if you sell, then they have the rights for a while, but now the rights are online again. And what I would really love to do is to pursue somebody other than the BBC making them one of the new production companies who makes bigger series, so that each book could be explored with all of the nuances involved. So you'd have all the characters, and then you'd have the subplots too. That's what I would like. Will that happen? I don't know, because there's a lot of stuff out there for them to choose from, and so it may happen, it may not. Yes.
I assume you could live anywhere. What informs your decision to live where you do?
In the Pacific Northwest? Well, the main thing is that well, first of all, I would choose to live in the United States. I wouldn't choose to live in, well, I might, but right now, I have a lot of connections here in the United States, and so that would probably keep me here, although for a period of time I certainly could move somewhere else and might do that. But I live in the Pacific Northwest because I've always been a big weather person, and for many years I lived in Southern California for 34 very long years. And I was never a fan of Southern California. I don't need to offend anybody else. I really loathe it, and I have to go down once a year anyway to do a board meeting, and I'm always really glad to leave because I like big trees, I like weather, I like it when it rains, I like it when it's stormy, I like it when it's foggy, I like it when it's sunshine, I like seasons. So all of those reasons were why I moved to the Pacific Northwest and why I stay there right now. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
I was wondering what led to the decision to kill off Helen.
Well, in the series, one of the characters meets an untimely demise. And that's an artistic decision that a writer who creates a series has to come to. And if you're going to move the characters through time, place, and circumstance. I'm going to give you an example of what I mentioned earlier, the Poldark books. The Poldark books are really great. They're written by Winston Graham, and I believe there are 12 of them. And what Winston Graham does in those 12 books is move his characters through time, place, and circumstance. So you start out with Poldark and Demelza. Poldark has actually just returned from the Revolutionary War, and he is in love with this woman Elizabeth who thought he was dead, and she marries somebody else. And so then he meets Demelza, yada yada. Okay. When the books end, they are actually about Poldark's daughter. The last book is about his daughter Bella, who is a young adult and wants to be an opera singer. So that's a pretty big expanse of time that's been covered there. And so what Winston Graham did is he created this great huge family saga, and the characters change in time, place, and circumstance. With a crime series, you can't go that fast and that far because you as the writer are hoping to sustain a career. And so, if you move the character too fast through time, then pretty soon the character's 100 years old and still going out solving cases. So, but I didn't want to freeze my characters in time, place, and circumstance either, because when a series does that, then the writer gets into this thing of dragging in, and having obligatory scenes. Where they're going over old ground all the time. And here's, Aunt Mary Sue. Oh my God, here she is again. That's sort of what the writer feels and what the reader feels. You just get so tired. So I didn't want to do that. So I was in between those two things, and I wanted to move them forward in time, place, and circumstance. But if you do that, then you have to keep opening up their stories. And that means that you have to keep making changes in their stories. And you change in one of two ways, by bringing new characters in, or by eliminating characters, or possibly both. So I made the decision that I was going to eliminate a character because that would set a bomb off in Lindley's story, and it would also affect everybody else as well. So so it was an artistic decision to do that. I knew it for several books preceding, but I had to wait till the right book came along, and when I got to With No One as Witness, then I knew that I had the right book. And I knew that that was going to happen in that book. Although originally, to be honest with you, that book is a book about a serial killer, and my original idea, which was really hackneyed, was, I'll just have a serial killer, kill Helen. And then I realized, wait a minute, anybody would do that. That's what people do all the time. The serial killer kills somebody and the detective's family. I'm not going to do that. What I'll do is have somebody else kill her in one of these random shootings that take place, well, all over the place now, but were happening in London at that time. All she is standing on the front porch trying to get her door key out, and this kid comes along, and that's it. She's dead, just for the heck of it. So that was the way I chose to have that happen. And so as a result, then Lily's life is now opened up, and now we get to look at how he comes back from that. At the time of her death, Helen was pregnant, and that closes his story down even more, because there's a reason why babies don't feature largely in literature, and that's because there's no drama in a baby. Well, not a literary baby. Maybe the literary babies that give drama, and you probably use two fingers with one hand. So there is no drama with a baby in your story, which is why you don't see very many babies in stories. You can only do two things to put drama in with the baby, is that you can have the baby kidnapped or give the baby a fatal disease. So then you carry that on. Otherwise, you've got changing diapers, projectile vomiting, walking around patting the baby, screaming, cheating, whatever. But that's the stuff of real life. It is not the stuff of drama within fiction, see? And so once she was pregnant then, that made it even more important that something had to give. It was going to have to give, and she was going to have to heal it. Yes.
I have a question. Because you're so loved here in America, how was it when you first published the Linley books, when you went to England? Were you at all wondering how they would be received there, or how did
I had a British publisher early on. Before I had the British publisher pretty much at the same time of the American publisher, so I knew that they were going to be published. I didn't know exactly when, but I knew that they would be published. I was sort of kind of a blind spirit about the whole thing. Didn't really know, I'm getting my book published, and I never really thought one way or the other about how they would be received over there. And the neatest thing happened to me. I got to tell you, this is really cool. And I don't like to sort of pat myself on the back too much, but on my last trip to England, this was just this month, I was doing research on my next book, and I was in Shropshire, and different places that I would go, people would say, I would have my notebook and stuff, and people would say to me, so what are you doing here in England? And I would say, I'm researching a novel. Oh, what do you write? I say, I write British crime novels. Oh, crime novels. Might I know what the novels are? I heard of you. And it was so amazing to me that every single person knew who I was. That was that's huge.
Wow.
That's after 30 years
must be
of
so
effort.
exciting?
Well, it was really gratifying because I've been almost 30 years now. So it was really neat that even the guy at the passport control knew who I was. So that was great. And it's usually because they've seen the television show. What's interesting about the television show is, and I just found this out from Nathaniel Parker, is that the Linley Mysteries are among the top 10 most widely purchased and viewed of all of the BBC shows. And he found that out because the world arm of BBC World told him, because they wanted to bring the series back because it was doing so well, and it's all about them making money. So I'd say that the books they're dealt with respectfully now. At first there was always something that they wanted to, get after me for. But now they're, pretty well received, I would say.
Great.
Yes.
Can I ask you, I don't understand, and I have actually written to the New York Times, and you're always on the bestseller list. Why they don't review you?
Because I won't let them.
Oh, that helps to hear that. Why?
The question was, why does the New York Times not review my books since they're on the bestseller list? And the answer was because I won't let them. The reason why is that early on, they gave my books to a woman called Marilyn Stasio.
Yeah, she's still right.
Okay, all right. And so Marilyn Stasio, for some reason, I never met the woman. She took an immediate dislike to me. I think it may have to do with another crime writer that she knows, and the fact that this crime writer we don't really have a history, but that crime writer really hates me. For reasons I don't want to go into right now. But anyway, so Marilyn Stasio gave all of my books horrible reviews. She actually called them trash. And so the thing is that you can call them a lot of things, but I don't believe my books are trash. It's like I've read trash. But so anyway, well, my fifth book, she did that to Missing Joseph. And then I told my editor, I said, do not send any more books to the New York Times. Do not send them. And she said to me, well, if we could just get one good review in the New York Times, that's all we need to get you onto the New York Times bestseller list. And I said, don't do it. These have my name on it. They don't have your name on it. And if they make it onto the Times list, then they're going to make it under their own merit.
Which they have.
She said, okay. And the next book went on to the Times list. And they've been on it ever since. So that's why I won't let them send it.
That's interesting.
P.D. James didn't quite like the representation of Dalgleish on television. Do you like the Lindley representation?
Do I like the Lindley that's on television? Well, he doesn't look like Lindley.
Well,
He doesn't dress like Lindley. But I thought that his performance as Lindley was pretty good, as long as he didn't cry. He was like horrible at crying. As a matter of fact, when they killed Helen in the films, I specifically said, do not allow him to cry. You don't want to see that phony crying on the screen. And so they didn't. They had him just be completely like in shock, stunned. But they didn't allow him to do that phony crying. He's a great guy. He's a really nice guy. And I think they did an okay job. And he did I thought a fine job as Lindley, despite not looking like Lindley in the least.
With the rise of social media, do you find it harder to be an author? Or, I mean, do you feel more pressure with people wanting to have more of you or have you answer them? Or, I mean, how does that work with someone who's...
Social media thing?
Before, when you started earlier, you didn't probably have people emailing you every day, odd people like us or something.
Well, people generally don't email me unless it's about the foundation. That's the only emails that I get. I don't get emails from fans because I don't have a Facebook page. The Facebook page that's there was started by a fan, I'm not quite sure, and taken over by my publisher. And they know that I don't want to do Facebook. The only thing that I do is I do Twitter. They asked me if I would do Twitter. They didn't realize I'd be twittering so much about Donald Trump. So I do Twitter and I do Instagram and so I put pictures up. But again, sometimes it's pictures of me
But
wearing my Marshawn Lynch.
do you feel that complicates your life?
Oh God, yes. I think that technology has not made anything easier. It's made everything much more complicated. In the old days, you had to wait for a letter to come in the mail, and nobody expected to hear from you like the next day or 20 minutes later. But now, everything is instant, and that's the problem.
May I ask about the very, very, very deep psychology in your books, including especially the troubled characters? Careless and Red comes to mind. These deep, intense dramas and deep psychology and struggles and perversions and what have you. Where on earth did that come from?
Did you get the question? It was about, her question was, where does the deep psychology in my books come from? The characters that are, in some kind of psychological crisis, characters who have perversions, et cetera, where does that come from? Basically, it comes from my interest in human psychopathology. I've always been interested in it ever since I was a kid. And so I got my master's degree in psychology and counseling. And so I just have always been interested in the dark side of humanity. You know, I used to read them murder stories in the newspaper when I was 7 years old. So, and my parents, they were very laissez-faire, you know, they didn't care. They let me read whatever I wanted to read, and I'd ask questions, they would answer. But it was never, I didn't lead one of these overprotected childhoods where you know, everything was whisked away before we could see it. So we pretty much got to see whatever we wanted to see, and had interesting discussions as a result of that. How about one more question, and then I'll sign suppose if anybody has that. Usually when I say one more question, nobody has one. Yeah, way in the back.
Did you come up with your ideas before, like, say you go to England and you check out the sites in a particular area? Do you have an idea what your characters, or is it dictated by, you know, the way the city's laid out and the houses and...
So, okay, I say, did you just ask me, when I go to England, do I have an idea of what the plot is going to
Or is
be?
it dictated by the area you picked out?
Or does the area dictate it?
Does that dictate what the person's gonna do?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit of both. But I would say largely the area dictates what the story is going to be. Much more often that's the case than is the case of my going there knowing what I'm going to write about. I'll give you a very brief example of my going there knowing what I'm going to write about. And that is that a few years ago I went to the National Portrait Gallery. They have the Photographic Portrait of the Year contest every year. And if I'm there when it happens, I go because I really like photography. And I was there a few years ago when there was this really beautiful picture that I really liked. It didn't win any prizes, but it was really stunning. And in the National Portrait Gallery, you can sometimes get postcards. And I thought, well, let me go down there and see if they have any postcards. I can get postcards of different shows that are on. I thought, let me see if they have that particular image in the postcard. So I went down to the gift shop, and I could see that one of those little turn thingies had postcards on it, and there indeed was that a stack of those postcards that had that image on it, and it turned out that was the image they had chosen to represent the entire show. So it was on a banner outside and yada yada. Anyway, so as I walked over to buy one of those postcards, a man got there first, and he picked up the entire stack and and I thought, whoa, that is so interesting. And that became the story of a book that I wrote called This Body of Death. Was that idea of, okay, who is this person and why did he buy these postcards? So sometimes that's what happens. It comes like that. And other times at the location, then going to the location gives me the story. Anyway, I would be very happy to sign your books. Thank you so much for coming.